Okay. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining another Kaspersky webinar today. I'm joined here by my good friends and colleagues, Mr. Sergey Loshkin, Mr. Mark Rivero, Mr. Dima Galov. Hello, guys. How are you?
All good, Mr.
Good.
Dimitri.
Hello,
We are
everybody.
good. We are good.
So, thanks a lot for joining me today for this webinar. We're going to discuss some trends from what we mentioned and what we said that we believe that is going to happen in 2022. And in the other half of the webinar, we're going to present our trends, our predictions of what's going to happen this year. Before that, I would like to encourage everybody, if you have a question, if you want to get tell us something, you have the questions button here. So you can post your question and we will try to answer them as we go or at the end of the webinar. Also we have like an announcement that you can read our blog post about the trends that we just really released today. And last but not the least, tomorrow is the anti-ransomware day. So today we believed it was like the best day to have this webinar and to talk to you guys and see what happened. So I'm gonna put up the slides now. As I mentioned before, we're gonna talk about the trends in the past and the trends for now. A little bit about ourselves. We are part of Kaspersky's elite global research and analysis team. We are a small team of more than like 40 people, kind of like that. We are all around the world and we are researching trends and attacks and like highly advanced attacks against like financial institutions, against like banks, against governments. You can see some of our research that we published in we mostly write on securities.com, or you can see ourselves in some conferences. But let's go into the first part of our webinar, and this part is about 2022 trends review. So we're going to talk about the trends that we wrote, and we said like, maybe they might happen, maybe they might not. And the first one is the cross-platform functionality of the ransomware. And indeed, we said that we see that not only the Windows platform is being targeted, but also we see some interesting other platforms. And here it's a very interesting mention, the Red Alert N13V ransomware, which we've seen that it's targeting both Linux and Windows systems. Also, this ransomware supported halting the VMs in EXXI environment. So basically, they knew they were going after virtual environments, virtual machines in ESXi, and they implemented this functionality in order to have like a better attacking area. Another ransomware, Logbit, went even further. We've researched that they have, we found an archive of a test build, and we've seen malware for less common platforms, including macOS and FreeBSD, which is pretty something like, new. And also we've seen some interesting architectures like Smith and Spark. So, guys, I would like to ask what's your opinion about this one? Did you get it right? Did you get it wrong? Who wants to start?
Well, I can start with something really obvious and really straightforward, that the trend happened entirely, and we've seen multiple cases that ransomware gangs really understood that it is easier to invest their initial effort in developing ransomware from the very beginning on a language that makes it possible, the cross compilation for different architectures, and in that way they will be as adaptive as possible. For example, we've seen cases when on some storage devices there were found some vulnerabilities, and they were it took them minutes to adopt their developments and their ransomware implants in order to target this platform. So it happened at all. I think that Sergey and Mark know even more in terms of interesting cases. So words to them.
Um,
Well,
go ahead, Mr.
go
Losco.
ahead.
Okay,
I'll go
okay.
ahead.
Perfect. No, if we think about the affiliates cake of the equation, I mean, we have to think that there are like an amount of ransomware gang groups that are attacking out there, and at the end of the day, the affiliates have to choose like one of those groups in order to distribute that ransomware, and then they will probably choose like a group that has support for as many platforms as possible, and that's one of the reasons because those ransomware gang groups are developing samples not only for the Windows ecosystem but also for the Linux ecosystem. And if we take a look at the picture, we can see like the big names there, right? I mean, we have Lockbit, we have Blackbuster, we have Red Alert, we have Royal Ransomware. All of those groups have support for multiple platforms, meaning they can give the better service and binaries to their affiliates. So it's something that we will continue seeing this year probably.
Yes. Also, it's good to mention that it's becoming probably a standard in ransomware development because when you analyze the newcomers, right? We always analyze the newcomers on the market, different kind of groups that appears long time ago, then disappears and split it, then comes back, like maybe like Nevada or something like this, that we seen at the end of the 2022 that they are reappearing on the market, and they all coming with cross-platform uh, code, malicious code. And that's obvious because for example, if the actor is ransomware is a service platform, yeah, and it's acting like this, so the customers, the bad guys who want to use their ransomware, they're pretty much attacking various kinds of targets. And if they're really, really serious players on the market, they definitely want to see a cross-compiled code. Another thing that I want to add, probably year 2022 was a year of, in quotes, new encryption algorithms. For example, we can see that many kind of groups uses like ecliptic curve, right? When I see a new group, maybe it's not like well-known group, a small group that I found on some underground forums. In their advertisement trends, they also put like, "Oh, we are using AS plus ecliptic curve," and it's like it's becoming a kind of standard, not using the old, uh, yes, yet very powerful encryption algorithms, but they always looking for something new, something fast, something that could be really nicely implemented in, for example, Rust language that has already ready libraries for that, and so on and so on.
Yeah,
So
but
this
still,
is
it's quite important to mention that when we're speaking about like cross-platform ransomware, not it is not always written like in cross-platform languages. The same example that
Yes.
Mr. Dan has mentioned in the very beginning with Logbit, we see that they are like supports in different code bases that they are like in different branches are trying to adopt for new interesting architectures. That's not only one piece of malware that is being like working and developing for everything.
Mhm.
So I have a question for Mr. Sergey. Um, Something what you mentioned about modern encryption algorithms, and the question is, do you think the ransomware operators are also following the news and the trends about quantum computing, quantum encryption, and the fact that maybe there might be algorithms that might break traditional encryption algorithms?
Well, like ecliptic curve is not something new. It's just something that's not what was widely seen before, right? For some reason, somebody, I don't remember who was the first who implemented the ecliptic curve, but then when it first was implemented in ransomware, that I started to notice that everybody started to use ecliptic curves. They're just following the trend. For some reason, they said, "Oh, this is kind of something new, something that it couldn't be cracked," and so on and so on. About quantum, quantum resistance and all this stuff algorithm, I think it's quite early to make any forecast in this area because it's just all the development stuff, and I think for many years in future, maybe not that many, but still in a foreseeable future, they are not going to use something like this. They're going to modify algorithms. They're going to use um, well-known, very stable, very secured algorithms. And the biggest problem is not the algorithm itself. The biggest problem with the ransomware guys who are developing something is the mistakes that they do during coding, not the algorithm itself. And if the algorithm is secured from different kind of crackings attacks and crypto attacks, the implementation of algorithm may be not secured in the body of a malware.
Mm.
And usually when you analyze malware, when you understood, okay, this malware using this kind of algorithm, and you understand, okay, there's no point into trying to find vulnerabilities in the algorithm. Of course, you are trying to find vulnerabilities in the malicious code of the ransomware itself, and then maybe it's vulnerable to something that you can use to create a free decryptor or something like this.
Also talking about this encryption, I guess all in the call we agree that we can find like also like two like differentiations, like ransomware gang groups that are implementing their own encryptors based on ecliptic curve and others, and then other developers that are just importing library like big libraries, and the binaries are like quite big, and they're using those libraries to do the encryption because they are too lazy to code or to implement like an encryption algorithm is something that I guess we are all agree that we are observing as well. If we compare like different ransomware families.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot. I think we can move on to our second trend because we don't have that much time. And the second trend we're going to talk about is the fact that groups are becoming more industrialized. And when we are saying industrialized, we are mentioning the fact that, for example, we've seen last year the Black Cat ransomware group. They adjusted their TTPs midway throughout the year. They basically registered the domains that were made to look like breached organizations, like their victims. They also set up, which is like pretty interesting. They set up like um, have I been found websites, and basically they try to mimic those websites to put more pressure. What do you think about this one?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that this is happening, and I think the reason for this, I mean, is pretty obvious because the ransomware groups, after all these years, like many years, they become in nature, and they are. You remember all these, I don't know, cyberpunk books from different kind of forces, or even cyberpunk movies, and you can see in them that there are like corporations, and there are good corporations, there are government corporations, and also there are bad corporations, and the ransomware groups having all this money, and they're quite rich, right? They really rich in terms of in terms of their income, so they can afford themselves to mimic or even try to become something like at the moment like a small corporation that could actually be as a real one that can do APR stuff, that it can do like this in industrialization stuff, and so on and so on. They inviting people who know something about this, and then not only inviting, but they own developers or they own managers. They becoming more mature, and it's yeah, it's something like this. They could become much more wider in terms of different kind of internal departments and blah blah blah, and it's they becoming looks like more real world companies, corporations.
Yeah, but still, when we were speaking about corporations, I don't think that like our listeners should be thinking about them like only like big companies and everything done in house, because still we do see that different subgroups, for example, who are doing the initial access, like the initial access brokers and botnet masters, or the people who are doing the money laundry, or people who are selling some exfiltration tools, or I don't know, tools for lateral movement. They're also inside this ecosystem, inside this industry, but they are so much decentralized. So what Sergey was speaking about is that at first we've seen, so as from my point of view, so at first we've seen some kind of small ransomware groups who were trying to do everything in house. Then they understood, for example, that it is not so much profitable to spread their efforts in, for example, developing or like getting initial access, because they are not good at it. And there are other groups who are more mature in that terms. So they, for example, focused on developing of their internal infrastructure, or developing additional tools or platforms that are provided for the affiliates. So they focused on that, and they started like I think that at this point, when they understood the scale of the attacks that they can handle, the wholesome like understanding of what is ransomware as a service popped up, because they started like getting affiliates who are not at all related to them, like in terms of industry, in terms of like corporation, let's say, but they're just like getting the share of what they're doing. And some affiliates can work with multiple different providers of ransomware, for example. So I think that still it is interesting for us even um, not to think about these groups as something immature. And this also brings us the understanding of why we're always saying do not pay the ransom, because we understand how much money is there inside the industry, and every ransom paid is just reinvestments in their developments and their salaries and stuff. So.
I absolutely
Well,
agree with my both colleagues. It's all about money. It's all about money. We have a report from the FinCEN like half a year ago. They could take at least 5.2 billions in BTC transactions, and this means the money that they were managed to detect. But we don't have in the picture like all of those transactions that were made by the victims to pay for those ransomware rescue payments. So we are still missing that information. The initial access broker, as Mr. Gallo explained it, are one of the source power of source information that those ransomware gang groups are using to breach like high profile victims, and those guys were there before the ransomware gang the ransomware as a service model, meaning that they were selling the accesses to either stealers or other cyber criminal groups to have information, and now they are like getting more money from the ransomware gang groups because they are getting like big part of the payment rescue that is being paid by the victim, meaning that those high profiles are paying even more money compared to middle or little size victims that are affected by ransomware, and it's a real industry. And as Mr. Loskin said, they are getting a lot of money, huge a lot of money.
Speaking about money, there is an interesting case that, again, just showing that they're getting more like big corporations that are able to do high profile attacks and stuff. We had like just 3 weeks ago the case of Nokoyava ransomware that managed to buy like 0 day and use it in the wild. And one of our colleagues, also from the global research and analysis team, managed to find this 0 day in Microsoft software, and just understand that Nokoyava was able to buy it and to use it. And that means that this kind of movement of high profile attacks that they are able to conduct means that they are closer and closer to APT attacks. And that's what actually we are saying, for example, when people say, so if we have a look at the statistics, we will see that there is like a decrease of number of detections, number of users attacked by ransomware. So that means that ransomware is dead. No, actually not. It's just getting more targeted, and it's getting more high profile, and like big game hunting operations are getting even bigger.
And talking about and talking about detection, this is quite interesting what Mr. Gallo says, because we could see based on our analysis that we do that a lot of the times the affiliates are managed to disable the local security of the system prior to execute the ransomware, meaning that we don't have security like looking on the events, you won't have any detection.
We have two questions from one of our audience. From the last question, one question we're going to answer at the end, but one question I want to ask you, maybe you know, it's about the trend we just discussed, but just to the question. And do we happen to know the origin of the first name that we mentioned, the Red Alert N13V? Do we know like where are they from or what they are targeting?
Good question.
I don't know. Maybe we know.
First,
Maybe the answer is we don't know.
probably this is like a historical question about like the first reported ransomware in the world. But are
Ah,
you sure?
maybe. Okay,
Yes,
we can discuss this a little. Discuss this at the end.
so
Then maybe I
I'm
don't.
not
I think
100%
they
sure, but it was like ransomware started somewhere in 90s with AIDS. I believe that
yes.
it was like it was not even encrypting data. It was like kind of malware that was hiding the files on the hard drive, and it was like changing the names or something, but it was quite stupid and didn't work well. But as when we are speaking about like the historical timeline that we analyzed ransomware, we dated back like 2006, I guess, when ransomware started like quite develop started developing. And for us, we're always like we have like a timeline of from 2006 to 2022, 23 already, so it's on secure list. You can have a look as well, because like a lot of people are saying that ransomware started only with WannaCry and stuff like that, but actually it's been out in the wild for a long time before, but no one was just speaking about them.
The name was the IDS Trojan, who was the first
It's
one
yeah,
that
okay, yeah.
at the
Yeah,
ransom.
I remember. I remember. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to our third trend for last year, and this trend is like pretty interesting, mostly because we've seen like a lot of activity and a lot of mm, ransomware groups taking sides. You might have heard about the famous Conti ransomware, and they basically they publicly published their support for Russian government in their blog post, and later they got like you might know that when they got like hacked and their chats were leaked. But we also seen other types of malware, and we've seen one peculiar sample, a stealer called Eternity. And my colleagues from Great, they researched this sample, and we wrote a private report about it. But actually, our research showed that there's like a whole malware ecosystem around this stealer Eternity. So Eternity was just like the small piece in the bigger family. What's interesting is that after the article appeared, the malware author made sure to say that he wrote like messages, pro-Ukrainian messages, and also inside the malware source code, you can decompile, of course. We can see that there are messages, pro-Ukrainian messages. So, what do you think about this trend, guys?
If I may start, so I think that the picture is even wider and bigger than you said, because, like, let's say, quite hacktivism, like it existed for a long time. It existed before, but we have seen that a lot of software companies, even legitimate ones, they started using their products in order to some kind of show their political attitude to some questions or to some problems. also like the malware developers started doing the same. And that's not the first time when we do see that ransomware is used for destructive purposes. So because even before we categorized ransomware sometimes as wipers, so that meant that the implant itself could be pretty the same, but it didn't encrypt the data in a design to make it possible to decrypt it after. It was just deleting it, just wiping the data. So, but now I think that for the first time, maybe colleagues know better, but for the first time, we've seen that some ransomware groups who have been financially motivated since the very beginning of their existence, they started doing destructive operations, claiming that just like demanding some kind of political ransoms, just like saying to do something in order to get the files decrypted. So, and that looked quite unfamiliar for us, and probably you've seen some cases before, Sergey, Mark.
So the thing is, we have to think when we think about ransomware, we have to think from a defensive standpoint what it means for a SOC or for a defense team when they hear about a ransomware going on in the company. I mean, everyone is running, like trying to stop the threat and trying to defend information and to know which was the point of entry. So it's like the perfect measure to become a company crazy, like running for an incident like that. And it's also like a good method for the attackers to, as Mr. Gallo says, to destroy all the resources of the company. So it's something that we observed in some targets where the attackers were like stealing information in other place of the company and then launching a ransomware to destroy evidences like even Windows server logs or evidences of registries or traces that were there left by the attackers. So it's like a perfect tool to wipe everything and then have the forensic team like spending time in something that nobody cares in terms of because it's not like a ransomware attack and it's like an operation to exploit that information from other way of the company. So it's true that we observed like many campaigns where ransomware was there, and after the analysis, we didn't find any risk we know or any like contact point to contact with the from the victim perspective to contact with the ransomware authors to get a decryption or decrypted after make the payment. So it's something that we observed already.
So you mentioned like a SOC team and like blue team members being like flooded with extra work. And we have a question from our public. Basically, the question here revolves about around the sandboxing systems, if they are useful against ransomware attack, if you can use if you can like try to upload your sample to a sandbox, will it be useful? Will it be not? What are your thoughts about this one?
Some boxing is like a good thing to have. I mean, use it as pesky ones. But one of the problems that we are facing, and I guess Mr. Loskin can explain some cases about that. Most of the ransomware nowadays, I mean, I'm talking about like the big ransomware gang families. All of them requires arguments. They require like an ID or a key in order to decrypt the payload and then execute it on the machine. And without specifying that, the ransomware won't run. So you don't know which family is or which changes is doing in the machine. So maybe Loskin, can you explain some cases in Black Cat or other families?
Well, it's not only the black cat, but many many kind of ransomware. Definitely, yes, you're completely correct. The ransomware is lately executed manually. So the bad guys, they have initially compromised the system, and they with various kind of techniques, preliminary malware, maybe red teaming exercises, hacking exercises, vulnerabilities, and so on and so on. So basically, for the last cases I saw that I was working on, I definitely see from the logs that the ransomware was executed from the command line, mostly with the arguments. And these arguments could be very, very specific. It could involve special running key and different kind of other things. So, and if, for example, imagine the sample is being grabbed automatically by some solution and executed, sent to the sandbox and executed in this sandbox, it won't simply run. And again, what kind of sandbox here we are speaking? We are speaking about EDR solution sandbox, or we are speaking about the some service sandbox that a security researcher or SOC analyst could log in. Then probably, if you're speaking about this kind of sandboxes, then he could simulate the exact way how the attacker runs the ransomware. Then he will probably get some results, and it would be quite effective.
It's a
So
good
again,
addition to the ecosystem of your protection suite.
yes, exactly. So different kind of mechanisms should be implemented in protection, but especially for the ransomware attacks, I think the best protection mechanism is having backups. That's it.
Sergey, tell us more about the geopolitical cases. Tell us more
What
about
geopolitical?
polarization.
The geopolitical cases. The good question is, if a ransomware group is politically motivated, what is the source of this motivation? If this ransomware group has members who, for example, feel patriotic, so they want somehow to first earn some money, second, to make bad things for a opponent infrastructure, and the opponent could be a government of a different country, economic as a company of the opposite countries, and so on and so on. On the second side, maybe the ransomware groups doesn't do it voluntarily. Maybe they're not patriotic at all, but they are forced to damage the infrastructure, to encrypt the data, because for example, local government knows everything about the exact group. It knows everything about its members. It knows everything about the operations, and they just making pressure on them, like you're going to be arrested, or you're going to do some additional stuff with your ransomware income. That's it.
So the picture is always bigger. The picture is always
The
bigger.
picture is always bigger.
Yep, yep. Speaking of picture, let's move on to this year. Let me bring up the slides and let's discuss a little bit of the trends that we think that are most relevant for this year. Hopefully,
I think
yep.
there is a question. There is a
Oh,
question.
okay. Do you want to answer this question now, or do you want to answer it like at the end? Up to you.
Yeah, let's answer now. For example, there is
Okay.
question: can one of the presenters share his past experience with ransomware and how it was resolved? What he could have done better next time? Speaking about me personally, I can tell you about the analyzing of the ransomware, not, for example, doing the incident response, because I'm a security researcher who focus on reverse engineering. So, for example, with the Black Cat, Alpha Cat ransomware, when it just appears, it was in the Rust language. And when I started to analyze these ransomware, and it's quite complicated when I started to analyze the Rust ransomware first time, because it has a lot of wrappings around the native code execution, right? So it has of tons, hundreds of additional functions, and when each new version of the ransomware is compiled using the Rust language, the code is always different. So it's really hard to find signatures, to create a signatures for the ransomware core. And you analyze in the next sample, maybe in a couple of days, or maybe when the new version of released, and it looks completely different. You cannot apply the signatures, or maybe when you applying some signatures, you get like 10 or 20% of them resolved, and you need to again reverse the same thing again. And that's what I faced, because I was like unexperienced reversing Rust. But when I saw a lot of examples of the Rust ransomware, I started to learn how to reverse engineer Rust. I started to trying to understand, okay, how can I create a new signatures better? How I can create a database of my signatures? How can I um, automate the signature creation mechanism uh, directly from the data that I get from sample and so on and so on. And yes, for example, I will I if I'll be facing the black hat ransomware right now, I definitely would reverse it much more faster with a more effective result. That's quite
That's quite a good story. I'm not sure that the man who asked this question was asking about like the research side of the question. Maybe he was asking about like the ransomware case being investigated somewhere inside the company. If it is so, I think that we are not the best ones to answer that because we are not like SOC analysts or incident
Blue
response
team.
engineers. So yeah,
Uh, what I can say is that if you are looking at some campaigns like some ransomware attacks, we actually have a website called nomoreransom.org, and there are some success stories of victims, companies who were affected by ransomware attacks, and by using this website or by with the help of some research researchers, they managed to find a flaw in the ransomware, in the malware itself, and they managed to decrypt the files. So although nowadays I would say that most ransomware samples, most ransomware families have bulletproof or have like super strong, like unbreakable encryption algorithms, there are cases where in you there might be like an attack, and due to some errors you can recover your files, you can get back on track.
that's what Sergey actually said, that the problem is not using the elliptic curve
Yeah,
algorithms stuff, but the problem is that people are implementing them and human factor is on their side as well.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
in
yeah.
these cases, we
if
are trying to help
if
people for free.
Now depends if this was a question from our audience or not. But I see there are some more questions. I suggest let's take them at the end, and then we can have like a chat discussion about those
okay.
ones. Also, because we don't have that much time, and we have to cover the topics for this year's trends. And moving on to the first trend for this year, we talk about embedded functionality. And when we are talking about embedded functionality, we want to say that, for example, the Black Basta, they started spreading themselves using LDAP library. So they're trying to get more attack vectors in order to try to infect more computers. Lockbit ransomware added the so-called self-spreading feature in 2022, and we think that this feature would actually be in practice nothing more than a credential dumping feature. So they are trying to be agile, if I can use this term from software development. The play ransomware, they have like a self-spreading mechanism, and it's using SMB to spread. So self-propagation is like a hot topic right now, and more and more functionalities are being added to ransomware samples. What's your thoughts about this one?
So something to think about it is one of the things that the industry notified when we were able to look at the chat from the county ransomware gang group. We noticed we everyone notified that some of the affiliates are not like super cyber criminal experts, so they have like hacking guides to do. You have to run this command, or you have to do this, you have to do that, in order to compromise a network. So of course there are some like super expert people out there like breaching security companies. The security of the companies, but we have other affiliates. We have other affiliates that are just following a guide. And this means that if they have like ransomware binaries that have like cool functionalities, like for example, do like automatic lateral movement, or to be able to copy inside the network uses using SMB. Is some like a job that will facilitate the infection from an affiliate point of view, and also after exfiltrate the data from the company, the most critical part of the operation is to encrypt the entire company. And this means as much faster you do that action, the more affected will be the company. And if they are not like able to defend anything, maybe they are more willing to pay in exchange to recover the data. And that's why the measure, because as Mr. Dan explained it, Play Ransomware, Blackbuster, Lockbit, probably they are I don't know, maybe they are on the top 10 of families that are out there affecting companies. So the big players are adding those functionality because they know they are really useful for their affiliates.
Well, I think that you've said it right, but I'm looking at this question as, from a perspective of actually, we already said a lot about the industrialization process in the transfer 2022, and this one is actually, let's say, quite a narrow evolution of that question as well, because as we see, there are multiple different providers of, let's say, ransomware infrastructure in the market, and they still do have some kind of their competition between each other in terms of trying to attract affiliates, like more and more affiliates, to work with them, providing like the most straightforward and easy to use tools for everything they need to do. And as you correctly said, that they're trying even to hunt not for high level experts who can handle everything on their own. They need some kind of middle level affiliates who can do just the monkey job for them, just conducting everything and utilizing the platform and utilizing those tool sets that they are providing. And in here, I think that we actually, Mr. Dan has chosen these self-spreading examples just because we've seen like a lot. We've seen like so many different, as you said, last year, developments of exfiltration tools that are working that even faster than any like like any tools that were used previously to dump data. But in here, self-spreading, I think, is something that is quite obvious, let's say, to implement and to make life easier, but we haven't seen it so much in all the cases, just like right now we see that different groups are trying to implement the same thing and just like having a look at each other, trying to steal the best features they're providing just to be as competitive compared to each other as possible.
Okay. Uh, I think this is a great summary of this trend, and let's see what will happen for next in this year. We are closely monitoring the threat landscape to see what is happening, and for sure we will see next year if we are right with this one or not. Let's move to our second trend for this year, and this is an interesting topic. It's about abusing drivers, mostly for Windows, but who knows? Maybe we can also talk about like Mac OS drivers or like kernel drivers in Linux. And this is a really interesting story. One of the ransomware actors, they try to use a game called the Genshin Impact, and in this game they have like an anti-cheat driver, and this is popular with all kind of games like Counter Strike, Valve, Dota, Blizzard, Blizzard's World of Warcraft, Modern Warfare. All these games they have like anti-cheat drivers. But this actor, they use this driver in order to disable endpoint protection. This is something like crazy, and it made us realize that more and more actors are gonna try to use this kind of methodology. Furthermore, we've seen malicious drivers signed with stolen legitimate certificates. So there are some cases from NVIDIA and also for like a telecommunication company where they have like valid certificates. Their certificates were stolen, and then the drivers, malicious drivers with digitally correct signatures were used in wiper attacks against like Albanian organizations. And how they were doing that. Um, Maybe guys, you can talk a little bit more about this event.
Yes. Well, so basically, it's a really interesting topic and questions because for the last few months, I see a huge interest to the vulnerable drivers topic, not only from position of the security researcher, but from the darknet, from the guys who are developing the malware. And this is interesting because at the moment we have a lot of public information about vulnerable drivers. For example, there are tons of information about vulnerable drivers in the internet, like different. Even on GitHub, we have a lol drivers GitHub page that has a list with MD5s of discovered vulnerable drivers, maybe without the exact details of the vulnerability, but still, they mentioned that this driver is vulnerable. And the thing is that a lot of these drivers has their signature unrevoked. It's active signature, this correct signature, but the driver has a vulnerability that allows, if this vulnerability is properly exposed, it can allow you to do absolutely everything. Everything on the victim machine, starting from disabling the endpoints on the kernel level and installing the rootkits and whatever it is. So for an attacker perspective of view, installing a vulnerable driver on the infected machine is a universal gate to everything. And that's why I saw a huge interest, and the ransomware groups are paying a good amount of money for for the information about this kind of driver and their vulnerabilities, because it's easy. It's easy to use these drivers. It's easy to use these vulnerabilities for a full control. So it so imagine there is a initial red team of the ransomware groups that trying to get access to some system. Imagine they had already access to this system. The only thing they need is to escalate their privileges to get to other machines, to get the administrator credentials, and finally took over the domain controller, for example. They can go one way using like typical red teaming exercises, red teaming algorithms to escalate the privilege by using the Windows disconfigurations and blah, 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 blah. Or they can just install the vulnerable driver. That's it. And there are plenty of this driver already know. There are plenty of this driver with this type of vulnerabilities unknown. So everybody using it right now. It's a trend. It's a really one, and that's why it's happening. And it's not only the ransomware thing at the moment. It's a malware thing.
Yeah, that's actually what I wanted to stress on, that when we are predicting that for ransomware, that doesn't mean that only ransomware actors are abusing that. That's like a global trend, but for ransomware, it is valid as well.
Yeah,
And
basically once you manage to install the driver, it's game over. Like it's like done.
it's like another like how to say like a sensation or feeling or like a clear stuff that the ransomware gang groups are also observing what's going on in other part of the cyber criminal industry where this driver thing is happening in other campaigns, and that are maybe more on the APT side, and they are implementing that on the ransomware operations.
Okay. I see there are two more questions which popped out, and maybe we can answer them after our final trends and our third trend. Yes. Okay. And last but not the least, the final one, we're going to talk about, and we want to raise the fact that code adoption is even more like used nowadays. And what do we mean by code adoption? Basically, we want to say that largest ransomware gangs are improving their malware by adopting leaked or sold code. And this is a very important thing. Why do you want to do that? Well, mostly because it makes attribution harder. Like nowadays, a lot of hacking tools they use mimikatz. You cannot say, we found this malware, we know it's this ransomware gang. Well, why? Because it has mimikatz in it. Well, everybody's using mimikatz now. So if you use leaked code, if you use like sold code, you can kind of like hide your traces in between like in terms of like attribution. Secondly, Lockbit adopted 25% of leaked Conti code. You remember, as I mentioned before, Conti gang they got their like code leaked, conversations, everything. And basically, Lockbit they found this opportunity and they used a new version based on the code that was leaked from Conti, and it allowed affiliates to work with this code base. Collaboration between ransomware gangs has resulted in more advanced attacks, and we expect that they will try to use even more cutting-edge strategies to evade security measures. And ransomware organizations they try to develop and sell high-quality black market tools to other ransomware businesses, basically in order to boost their revenue. So not only they attack targets and ask for money, but also they sell their code, they sell their expertise in order to basically get more money. So we're talking about money, money, and money in this like trend here.
Well, yeah, I think that code adoption and reuse is not something new, and we've seen that like in multiple different other cases. I don't know, even in mobile banking trojans, almost all of them are like reusing everything again and again. Just like the code base is quite, I don't know, not stable, but you can see like familiar blocks of code in very different families. And I think that from the first perspective, it is just about threat actors being not lazy, but they don't want to reinvent some kind of bicycles, and having that many different families that are not working anymore and their code is leaked or sold or published or whatever. They just want to cherry pick some kind of functionality that they like. But also, I think that the big part in that question is playing the rebranding strategy, that the groups are not like appearing and disappearing entirely. They're just like changing brand, they're changing their strategy, be changing, I don't know, their victims, but the people behind can be the same. And being the same person means that you will be developing some kind of, not the same, but probably in some cases alike developments or alike code. The most important and like not the most important but the most interesting, I think, is that before, when we have seen that some code is adopted, it was just like digested inside the ransomware or malware in general entirely and like adopted. But for now, for example, as Mr. Riviero had research, probably you'll say a bit more that Logbit is having like three different versions simultaneously, just like having them at the same time developed in order to attract even more affiliates who were used to work with other groups that are out of the market for now. Just like trying to be again as competitive on the black market as possible.
So at the end of the day, we have to think about who is behind those development programmers, right? So and those guys are probably seeing like as Mr. Gallo says, some like big famous groups that were out there like breaching everything and affecting a lot of companies, and then the source code is like leaked or sold or whatever, and then they're like, okay, let's take a look and extract the best functionality of them from them and then implement it in our piece of code. So programmers are used to adapt, take, copy, and paste code out there. We are all doing that all the time when we are creating like scripts or automations. So those guys are doing the same. And as Mr. Gallo said, they don't try to repeat the wheel. And talking about the logpick specifically, it's a curious that case because the logpick version that it's based on or big part based on the county source code. Imagine like a big bunch of affiliates that were used to work with the specific ransomware family, and then the ransomware family disappeared, and people wants to work or is used to work with the stuff that they know. So if a ransomware group is like I don't know, adopting the same command lines arguments, adopting the code functionalities, the way that they this ransomware infected machine is something that the athletes will be like really happy about it, and then it will mean that you have more soldiers for your I don't know team of affiliates that are infecting people and companies. So it's like clever strategy that those guys are doing in order to have even more people on their side working for them. And it's something that it will be still happening. And we expect movements from other ransomware ganglers to adopt functionalities or unique features from other big families to their own developments in order to have, let's or to be on the big on the first places of the table of ransomware families that are affecting everyone.
Okay, so this concludes our three main trends that we believe that we will see more prevalent this year. Now, I think we can go in the last part of our webinar where we can answer the remaining questions and also have like a fireside chat about like things that we will discuss here. I would like to start with a question from our second trend for 2023. I think it's an interesting question. Um, what is the best way to make sure that we aren't using a vulnerable driver or we don't have any installed in our system? And additionally, does Kaspersky Endpoint Security monitors for such rogue drivers? Who wants to answer?
Good, good. No one wants to do it. So
So so basically, there are different kind of measures you can implement to look for such kind of drivers. Uh, the most not effective one, but the one is still working, is to just monitor the information about all the vulnerable drivers that are available in public. For example, there are some kind of GitHub page that contains a list of vulnerable drivers with their MD5s. So basically, it's just a list of IOCs. You can go to this GitHub page. I don't remember the exact name of it, but you can Google it. You can download all the IOCs of the vulnerable drivers that are on this GitHub page and use them as a typical IOCs in your systems to detect vulnerable drivers. Another thing is probably to have a list of all the drivers installed in your system, and if there is another driver is trying to install on the systems that shouldn't be allowed. For example, speaking about security products, of course, the security products is monitoring such activity as an installation of some kind of a driver. So, for example, if there is an application, a malicious application that is trying to install the driver, that would be probably detected by the antivirus solution because it's a step-by-step operation that probably would be detected by the antivirus heuristic engine. When there is a case that your machine is already compromised by somebody and it's trying to install the malicious driver, but it's not a malicious driver because this driver doesn't have a malicious functionality, right? It's a vulnerable driver with the correct signature. And if somebody tries to install this driver in a victim machine using the command line interface, for example, it would be much more complicated. And I think the best measure that could be implemented here is the Windows controls that not allows uh, everybody to install drivers or even local users to install drivers, so on and so on. So the uh, typical things that you implement when protecting the organization.
Thank you, Mr. Sergey. I have kind of like a similar, in the similar way, question of what kind of stuff should we look for when searching for evidence in either in a victim system or in a system used to commit ransomware? So basically, I think the question is how can you, in general terms, of course, detect or try to understand that you are under a ransomware attack? Any thoughts? Like maybe top three
I
actions to
say
do?
I say a disk note on your desktop. That's like the main principle of being like
When your files are encrypted, you are under attack.
you're
This
under
is
Well,
attack.
I think it's game over then. I think it's like kind of like okay, now it's like game over.
So if the programmers, if the development team is like calling you that they cannot access the database and it says pay the money back, it's like a good thing, good sign that you are affected. No, but basically it's hard to reply this question because at the end of the day we have to understand like the context of the company that was affected. I mean, if we're talking about like medium-sized company, they will probably not decide about the breach because some like person working there, they enter in the file system server and they find out that the files are not accessible, for example, right? Or for example, if they are like looking at the desktop, they will find like a risk node, right? So it depends on the company, but to summarize, I guess it's like no possibility to access to the files, like part of the company or service is not working at all, and then like I don't know, more like attacks on your company from site attacks that someone has your information, blah blah blah, all this kind of stuff.
that's
I
quite a
think the
good
best
answer,
way,
but okay, go.
sorry, I think the best way to understand is to have a centralized monitoring of your CPU usage. And
Oh,
if in your organization simultaneously many machines has a CPU usage on a high level, probably something is happening inside your organization.
or maybe the employees are working so hard, Mr. Luskin. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, so
Everybody's compiling
all your
code.
tips and tricks are quite good, but they mean that we're trying to do that monitoring at the point when the company is already screwed. But so our colleagues actually, so like in general, monitoring is good, and if we want to monitor the ransomware activity inside the infrastructure, like from the during the whole timeline of the attack, and this timeline can take like not hours but days and weeks. So and we separate that at the like three different stages. The first one is just like getting initial access and looking around. The second one is lateral movement, exfiltration of data, and encryption. And the third one is then when you're screwed. Actually, that's what you've been talking about. So to monitor all that, last year we created, and our colleagues from anti-malware research created a cyber kill chain for ransomware, for the activity of ransomware gangs. Because if you have a look at like top 10 different groups and analyze their TTPs, actually you will see that the tool in their like their own developments can be quite different, but those methods that they are using to get initial access, to move laterally inside the infrastructure, to expose some kind of credentials or services or yada yada. So there's like a huge list of things that they can do, and if and you just like put this activity atop the timeline of the attack, you will see the weak points and the bottlenecks where you need to do monitoring or protection or stuff. So it's like, I think that it's quite a big question. So the gentleman who asked about this question, you can probably check out our publication on Secure List. It's like a really huge document explaining what are the weak points to monitor inside the organization in order, just like, you can't be sure that you won't be attacked. You won't be sure that you won't have some machines exposed, but at least you will stop the attack from like not making it possible to get to the final destination of extorting money.
Yeah, basically there are, from my point of view, although I'm not like an expert in like blue teaming or blue teams and SOC operations, I think there are two big scenarios. The first scenario where it's like a targeted ransomware attack, where the attackers are actually probing your network, for understanding your workflow, understanding your network, maybe better than you, and then they manage to get an intrusion into your network, and then once they manage to enter the network, they steal all the files and they deploy the ransomware attack. So that is the first scenario. And in this case, you have to worry about the intrusion itself. How did they get in? And then when you see the ransomware attack, it's kind of too late. Secondly, it's like kind of like more generic attacks where it's just like a vulnerability being widespread. Let's not forget about WannaCry, or uh, destructive wiper attackers, like for example NotPetya, where it's not like it's not targeted, but rather a vulnerability which is widespread used might be used against your company through a malware which automatically spreads itself. So in both cases, it's very important to have, as Mr. Dima said, have monitoring to try to see failed logins, failed denied action, denied actions, or any kind of like access denied things that might alert your SOC team. Okay, we have a question about like some feeds, if you like cooperation for Kaspersky, and the answer is yes. We cooperate with a lot of entities. We cooperate with a lot of partners throughout the world. For example, with Interpol, with a lot of law enforcement agencies. So please send us an email to crimewareintel@kaspersky.com. I will publish this as an announcement. I will publish our email address where you can contact us for all cooperation. Now we have a question about which immutable copy service platform would you recommend for businesses? Who wants to take this?
I'll take this one. So basically, when we talk about the backup strategy, we have to think about what's the best to maintain copy service for your company. So you have to create like a disaster recovery plan. That plan will like say, or will establish that you need like a NAS or additional hard drives that have to be like not connected to as a network share to the company, and not on the same building, and you can do it, I don't know, in the cloud, or maybe in other building, in other like country, in order to protect those copies. So and also how those copies are moved to the other location. So if we have the possibility to, this is the company, this is the backup, and then we are sending the data to the backup. It will mean that when the ransomware gang group has access to the building and to the infrastructure, it will be able to access also to your copy service. But if it's your copy service who is going to extract the files from your company and then back at them to another external location, this is an effective disaster recovery plan and an effective backup strategy in order to maintain your data secure. That's it's a term of a strategy, and it's a term about security architecture that you have to define for your company.
Anybody wants to add something? Well, okay. In this case, I would like to say that unfortunately we do not have time to answer other questions. I saw that we have two more, which is kind of like a philosophical questions, and just to give like a brief answer to those questions, whether that if good guys versus the bad guys, who is winning. I think it's like a cat and mouse problem, as bad guys are developing new and new tactics. Us, the good guys, we are understanding and developing new and new protections. So basically, this fight will be on forever, and that's why we're here to help you protect against the bad guys and to share our experience and knowledge with you. Um, Then we have one last question. So regarding the CPU utilization, which is like a good solution. What are other simple solutions? Well, first of all, I would say check out the logs. Check your logs to see if and check out your I/O to see if there's like a lot of read and write files. And actually, our Kaspersky System Watcher product is able to successfully block ransomware attacks. If done, they managed to do it in the past. They managed to do it now, and basically, System Watcher uses the same technique as monitoring the resources, monitoring the load, monitoring how many files are open, read, written, and closed. And applying this trick basically protects you against ransomware attacks. With this being said, I would like to thank my guests here today, Mr. Sergey, Mr. Mark, Mr. Dima. Thanks a lot for joining me for this webinar. Thanks to our audience for joining us today. Thanks for all the questions. And if you want to contact us, crimewareintel@kaspersky.com. Hope to see you for the next webinar and hope to see you next year to see if our trends for this year were true or not. Have a nice
Thank you,
day.
everybody.
Thanks a lot,
Bye.
gents.
Bye bye, everyone.